you have to look at government programs too. Like, so we have the fiscal stimulus. So that's something the government might implement. This very easily translates into UBI. And we saw this during the pandemic when they were just sending people checks to basically stay home. They can do that again. I mean, in a crisis, they can do what they want. And you might see something like that. In 2008, I know Obama sent everyone checks. COVID was really unique because they kept sending people checks. Every week they would get their check in the mail, and a bunch of people were on that program. So you can see something like that, which very easily can turn into a form of UBI if people don't have jobs.
Well, I remember what was happening is the money was being sent, and I think it was the equivalent of about $20 an hour. Mm-hmm. So I'm going off of memory, but I do know friends of mine that own restaurants, and they were saying this is crushing us because the government's basically sending people the equivalent of $20 an hour. And so I all of a sudden, if I'm paying less than or that, why would they actually come to work? And so, it really, really kind of collapsed a lot of stuff. It actually drove wages up in that area. I think it's settled down a little bit now, but that is the other side of UBI is as we start to give money out or as people start to get assistance in some form, whether it's from their parents or whether it's from trust or whether it's from, the money that's trickling down from people that are retiring or whatever it is. Daniille's in the business right now. She said there's a lot of parents that are buying their kids houses because they can't afford houses. So that just, we met with one young man where his mom bought him a house and he set up the entire house for gaming. Mm-hmm. Like, can you imagine that? I'm like, well, what are you doing for income? Oh, yeah. I'm good.
And
for gaming.
Yeah. But it's really great that, parents can do that. And, but it really goes back to these other programs. So like mortgage relief programs are really big right now. And we saw that during COVID where they would allow, people to delay paying their mortgages or they can modify their loans. And the government doesn't want housing to crash. So they're going to keep people as satisfied as they can in whatever means they need to do if it really turns into a crisis.
And that could, and for sure, potentially will happen, right? I don't know if the government's going to have to step in, but to your point, if somebody's having a tough time making the payment and they have a lot of equity, my guess is the mortgage company's probably going to work with you somehow, right? But if you have no equity and you can't make the payment, probably not, right? But that's all going to be, we'll see. But, defaults will for sure go up. I think you're going to start to see delinquencies higher on rents. You're going to start to see delinquencies higher on the mortgages. And then, of course, from there, the, different kinds of programs, people will step in to try to keep people in place. Because the one thing that they don't want them to be is displaced. But this is all stuff we saw before. This is not new. We saw it in 2008, 9, 10, and beyond. And I think that all you got to do is go back and look at the playbook then and kind of project forward. Yes, it's different, but what's not different is unemployment going up over 10 potentially due to AI. And I actually think that's a real thing. And I'd be very surprised if we weren't there by the end of next year.
The other thing that you could see, though, is the government could just expand and create jobs. Because I know that, a lot of these government jobs already are not needed. They're basically assistance programs as they are.
I think Roosevelt did that, right, for the New Deal way back in the day. And that's, highways and dams and, projects like that, highways and dams and, projects like that, again, but, again, you have to get people that want to work, right? It was very different back then, there was a lot of really hard workers and people working with their hands. Though, by the way, those folks, they're going to be fine. Seriously, plumbers, electricians, air conditioning, those are next decade's millionaires for sure, because you can't replace those people with AI.
Yeah, but the government also can create jobs that are a little more cushy. I know someone that works for the water department and they go into work twice a week. And typically when they go into work, they're touring the water stations and they probably work, honestly, 15 hours a week, but they get paid for 40 hours, but they also get paid a low wage, $55,000 a year, but they get benefits and a small pension. And I kind of think that if they needed to, the government would expand those kind of jobs where they're giving you just enough to get by so that you can live somewhere and afford food. But at the end of the day, you're not like making a killing, but you also have an easy job and you're just doing a little bit of things that they need done, sort of, but could probably live without you. But, it's basically assistance, but giving you some kind of job responsibility versus just giving you money.
Yeah, I guess possibly. To your point, I mean, the government's going to be in this weird situation where if they get more efficient and go AI like a water, I remember when they used to have a guy pull up in front of the house and go around the house and actually physically put right down on the water meter, right? And then it would go back and it would go in the system and then you get your water bill. Now, of course, that's all electronic, right? And so all of those kinds of jobs are moving that way. They're all moving that way. They're more automated. And so what that means is less and less people. But whether or not that industry, that government, that department decides to employ those kinds of things and reduce their employment footprint, we will see. But I will tell you, the private companies are already moving that direction. The ones that are trying to keep their stock price high, the ones that are trying to keep their profitable high, the ones that are trying just not to go out of business. Those are the ones that are doing this first. And then, of course, the bigger companies, the bigger corporations, typically, and certainly the government, are typically the very, very least and the very last.
Well, we hope to see you guys for our podcast on Thursday. It's the Ken McElroy Show. Check it out. And if not, we'll see you next Monday.
See you guys.